All right. Tyler, ready?
Yep.
All right. 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to Around the 412. We are part of allsteelers.com and proudly presented by Crowworthy, where winners are serving winners coast to coast with sports, gambling, and more. You can follow Crowworthy at Crowworthy on Twitter and visit us at crowworthy.com. You can also check out the Crowworthy Pittsburgh City page for podcasts just like this one, blogs, and more. I'm Tyler, and with me as always is Smitty, and today we are joined by Penguins writer for The Athletic, Jesse Marshall. Jesse, how's it going?
Doing well, gentlemen. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. We are excited to talk about some Penguins topics with you. Stuff that dates back a little bit too. I mean, we've talked about a couple of these topics on here, but it's great to have you on and talk with you. I don't want to, think that I'm, riding your coattails here or anything like that, but I am a big fan of your work. I form my own opinions, obviously, but I always look to you when there's things that I'm a little bit unsure of, as far as like something that we're going to talk about with the Hornquist trade, how Mike Matheson might fit in on this defense as we look for his career to rejuvenate, hopefully, and stuff like that. So I am a big fan of your work. And I want to ask you a little bit before we start talking about these topics, because obviously you weren't just born and all of a sudden you're writing for the Athletic. So how did you get to where you are now?
I toiled a lot of years on letsgopens.com and hfboards.com and Hockey's Future, just arguing about hockey. This was but I'm old. Like, I'm not that old. I'm like over 35. I'm like 36 now. But like at the time, like this predates blogs. You know what I mean? Like we were still getting like our Penguins news from the paper. That's like how it worked. So as time went on, I kind of was in college. I went to Point Park and I was an English major. Then I realized my senior year I probably should have switched to journalism, but it was too late, and I just stuck it out. And then I guess me and a couple of friends, my buddy Matt Bodenschatz, a couple like Chris Mack from 93.7 The Fan, who's there now, we started up. We had a blog that we just started writing about hockey. I think the intent, from my perspective, was I felt like there wasn't a whole lot of draft and prospect discussion going on in the mainstream. And, given the fact that the Penguins had just, were pretty bad. And that was the main thing you were looking towards was, the future of Evgeny Malkin, and all these prospects that were in the pipeline. So we kind of set out, with the intent to do that. And, for a while, our moms read it. And then, eventually it turned into something. And then, my friends I was with moved on and got married and had kids, and I shut that down and joined the Pens blog, and then just kept grinding. Really, I mean, it was just people always ask me for advice. You gotta write tirelessly. That's really it. That's how you kind of get out there. So that's really how it went, and I was fortunate enough to, by that point, know a little bit about James Myrtle and what he was about, and had some conversations with him, and didn't actually know if they were going to ask me to participate. I had some feeler conversations that made me feel good. You know what I mean? I had no clue. It was like a truck. So yeah, that's it, man. But it's a good place. It's a good place to be, and they kind of give me the freedom to do whatever I want to do and the weird stuff that I like to talk about. And yeah, they kind of let me own that. So it's a fun thing.
Yeah, that's awesome. So we know about the writing part, but you also do, you mentioned right before we started recording with us about the Dying Alive podcast, which you do with two other guys. So tell us a little bit about that as well.
Well, I think it's cool because, Pennsburg, Pens blog, and the Athletic are three, I mean, if you're a Penguins fan, you're probably visiting one of those three sites at some point during the week. And there's way too much territorialness, I think, in Pittsburgh, which is so weird to me because there's so many things to talk about. So, it was nice to do a show with Pat, from Pens blog, and Mike from Pennsburg, with just, three dudes talking about hockey in a city where there's plenty of room for that. So we don't record as much as we should. We're totally guilty of that. Our jobs make it difficult for all three of us to be online at the exact same time. And Mike and Pat work in the news world, so they're never not working. But it's been a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. It's cool to have them co-sign it. We didn't start out in the Athletic Network. We're just basically just jerking around, doing shows whenever we wanted, like with no format. And it became a thing that, got pretty consistent. It was awesome that they picked us up. So, more to come. We just did an episode last week that tried to recap everything that had happened over the summer. And there's not enough. We have to do, it's going to be like a 9-part, adventure, because this is way too much to go over. So.
Yeah, I remember seeing like Pat tweet about that and saying like this is going to be like a 5-hour show if we try to put it. So I was like, yeah, there's no way that those guys are going to grind that out. I mean, we have like some of our shows that are like we're like 3 hours long, not anymore, but it was that way before. That will never be the case again. That's just ridiculous. So
this is definitely one of those seasons where you could pull it off, though. So
yeah, but no, it's awesome. Seeing what you guys are doing, you individually and, with the podcast and everything, ton of success. We wish you guys continued success. So we are excited to have you on to talk about some Penguins related topics. As I said, we're going to kind of jump back all the way back to the Kasperi Kapanen trade. I know, you especially, being that you cover the draft, we're super excited to start throwing out some names for who the Penguins are going to take with the 15th overall pick. And all of a sudden, that pick is no longer the Penguins pick. It goes to Toronto in a Kasperi Kapanen trade. What was your initial thought, and where do you think that he fits in on this team?
Well, I think for me, this is a trade that if you have to view in the landscape of things and sort of where Toronto was in their situation going into this deal. And everybody knew that Kasperi Kapanen was going to be the, I guess, quote unquote, cap casualty that the Leafs are going to have to cough up. Given their current structure, and operating from a position, really I thought of weakness. They walked away with a haul, to get a first round pick. And, we could argue till we're blue in the face about, it's clear that the Penguins did not feel as strongly about Philip Hollander as I did. That's an obvious gap between me and them. I think I'm right. I do. I think I'm right. I mean, it's risky because he's been hurt twice now, right? So how does that affect his development? He's missed a lot of really important time, but he was already playing against grown men. So you could argue that he was way further along in his development than anybody really thought. My point being, though, regardless of what we think about Philip Hollander, he was still the third or fourth best prospect in the system. So you've given up Evan Rodriguez, who you end up re-signing, so that's a wash, a first-round pick, and one of your top prospects for a player that everyone knew was going to get dealt. I just felt like it was a situation where, and we've seen it before with Jim Rutherford, where he kind of hyper fixates on something, and come hell or high water, whether it be the Jack Johnson deal or what, it's on the team. So it's hard for me to talk about this deal and not mention that, because to me it's just as much a part of the trade as anything else is just kind of the I thought the over giving. As far as the place for him, it's going to be on Crosby's wing. It'll be with Crosby and Gensel. That is the position that Kasperi Kapanen failed in Toronto. So what caused him to be a cap casualty? Like, why is he in this situation? Because he ended up being a third line player there, and the Toronto can't afford to pay him that for being on their third line. So now the question I ask is, if it didn't work with Marner and Matthews and Nylander and Tavares, why would it work with Crosby? Because in my opinion, it's arguably harder to play with Sidney Crosby. So for me, this is the crux of the entire trade, right? Can Kasperi Kapanen fulfill the responsibility that they think he can? If the answer to that question is yes, this is no longer an overpayment. Everybody will be happy. I'll eat a plate of crow. But if he can't play on the top line, and these deficiencies in terms of, I guess, quote, how he thinks the game are real, and they're a hurdle for him, now you've given up all that for a third line winger. And in retrospect, the trade will look pretty bad for that.
Yeah, I mean, that's hard to disagree with. I didn't like the trade on the surface. Now, granted, it's kind of unfair to him to not see him play in a top 6 role and see how he plays with Sidney Crosby to dislike it. But I think I'm with you where, like, yeah, I'll eat crow if it doesn't, if he works out, I should say. But yeah, I can't get behind this on the surface. That 15th overall pick, like, if you're going to trade that pick, to me, it needs to be for something more than Kasperi Kapanen.
Right. And the spare parts, Ponch Saberg will never see him. And Jesper Lindholm is a great number 3 or 4 for Wilkes-Barre. Great number 3 or 4. But I just think that there's a peak, right? There's just a peak there. So, again, I think that it was an easy deal for Toronto to make, because I don't think anything came their way even close to that for him. That's my guess. Maybe there were teams crawling over each other, and that ended up being the price Jim Rutherford had to pay. I don't know. I can't see that being the case.
Yeah, well, that's the point I was going to bring up. It was right before. I don't want to interrupt you, Tyler, but that's the point I was going to bring up. Is who were they bidding against? I mean, I'm sure that there were other teams with interest, but for a mid-round pick in the first, pick in the first round, I hard to believe that would be the case.
Yeah, and I mean, I think maybe there was a sense in knowing that they were going to recoup a decent pick for Matt Murray, and it softens the blow, but there's in this draft in particular, big difference between 15 and 52. Big difference. A player, you look at it, we joked about Connor Zary, right? I made a big deal about this, prospect Connor Zary going up the draft. He could legitimately make the Flames. So, I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about Joel Palmquist and Callie Klang, and I think they're both good, but I think the message being sent here is just we're going even harder than we did before to try to get another one in this era. And it's just that, that's the price you pay for win now.
Yeah, I sent you a couple pictures of Connor Zary. And whenever we traded the pick, I sent you the Wolverine meme where he's looking at the picture. Yeah. But I would have been fine with the trade if it didn't include this pick. I mean, I would have rather given up a couple multiple picks rather than this first round pick, just because it's your highest pick since 2012, and it's the highest one that you've actually earned, because the 2012 one was traded for, since 2006. So I just don't see with this draft class how they could pass up on it. So that was very frustrating. But I mean, it is what it is, I guess, at this point. I really want to see him play with Sidney Crosby, because I don't know how he's going to do.
That's the ultimate thing for me. I mean, that's what determines whether or not this works out. And I've asked myself this question, what does it have to look like to be successful? I think that's more about just the long term. I don't think this is a decision that we're going to be able to make in 5 to 10 games. Let's give this a chance, see what happens, give it a good run, and let's see what he's got. I mean, at the end of the day, I think back to the feedback that Chris Kunitz always had about playing with Sidney Crosby. We really just stop short of saying it's annoying sometimes. It's this constant, nonstop source of feedback about what just happened going on all the time, and how, Kunitz was able to live in that, and a lot of players have been, but if the ability to go off script and freelance and do the things that make Gensel and Crosby and that partnership successful are where he struggles, we'll see it. It'll be easy to notice. I mean, it'll stick out like a sore thumb. So I just, everybody, we have no choice but to give this a crack. I think, at the end of the day, the one thing you can rest your head on is that from a toolbox perspective, it is there. I mean, the skill set, everything. He plays that heavy style that Hornquist played. His shot is unremarkable, but heavy. He can dangle for days. It's just, for whatever reason, long term, other than 160 game run, it hasn't really come together.
Right, that's a beautiful segue. You mentioning Patrick Hornquist, and a guy that was dealt from the team. Kasperi Kapanen coming in. Hornquist dealt from the team to the Florida Panthers from Mike Matheson and Colton Sevier. Now, you just mentioned, kind of playing a similar style. Patrick Horn, and by the way, that process was terrible. The trade getting leaked, the word getting out that this was going down, and then it takes a couple days to actually go down. And, the heartbreaking quote when he found out that Pittsburgh didn't want him, it was a pretty easy decision. Man, that, like I said, heartbreaking. It really did break my heart to hear him say that. But Mike Matheson, Colton Sevier coming back, Colton Sevier added to it the next day, and finally the trade going through. Initial thoughts on this and reason for optimism as far as Mike Matheson being able to revive his career here.
Well, I would say this first. I don't know that Mike Matheson needs to revive anything.
Okay.
I think he's good enough now, even as is, coming off of what people would consider a down year, that he's still an upgrade for you in like a lot of different ways. I think it's fine tuning. So like Matheson, I think, is the story of like two parts. One, Florida probably giving him way too much leeway in terms of his like green light to just take the puck and do whatever he wanted. Yeah, it's like even with Chris Letang, that would be a bad thing, right? You gotta like set some sort of like line in the sand and be like, you can't be pinching in these scenarios, right? And I felt like he kind of just had a blank check. And sometimes that was great and he scored highlight reel goals. And sometimes he was the only one in a 1-on-4 situation in the middle of a line change and he coughed the puck up. And it's like, all right, so that to me says is fixable because the Penguins just don't allow that. Like we just don't really since 2018 games, that game against the Caps, we've not seen the Penguins take a bunch of liberties defensively. So I think that'll rein that in a little bit. I think the other part is after he got disciplined for his hit on Elias Pettersson, which isn't his game. Like he doesn't have a penchant for that. A lot of people in Florida believe that he kind of like clammed up a little bit and that really affected him. So I think both of those things are workable. I think he's in much better shape, for instance, than Justin Schultz was when he got here. Miles beyond that, miles beyond. I think he's a number 5 for me, a good number 5 when you deploy him the right way. And I think he'll have the opportunity to kind of get back to some of the basics that gave him that contract in the first place. The contract's a problem. Yeah, well, I'm sure we're going to get to that. I'm trying to just separate player from that for now. And like he's got good wheels, good size, good hands, underlying numbers. They're really encouraging and is really kind of like the antithesis of Jack Johnson. I guess the question is whether or not we think it was time for Patrick Hornquist to be traded. You know, that's for people that are unhappy with the deal, I think that's really what it comes down to for them.
Yeah, we talked about it on here a little bit, thinking like, at least in I don't remember what Tyler said on it, but I thought that this would be the last year that Patrick Hornquist was here. I thought he'd be here this year, and then they would look to move him. So I would say it kind of took me by a little bit of surprise, but then you look at it like when we knew that somebody was getting dealt, we talked about the possible names. Hornquist popped up right away, the other one being Brian Roston. Definitely didn't want to see him go. So in that sense, I am not that upset about it. You mentioned the contract being an issue, and that's exactly where I wanted to go to next. Was the deal he's currently on? He is just 26. He's under contract for what, 6 more seasons?
A lot of people have said that that's like the worst contract in hockey.
How did he get what, an 8-year deal? Like,
he had a really good season just once.
Yeah,
and showcased like a lot of pedigree. It was like an Oli Mata situation. You know what I mean? Like imagine if like Oli Mata had that really good year and then the Penguins were like, here, this 8-year contract. I mean, I guess the one thing we can say is everything has proved movable. There's nothing that we've seen yet that hasn't been able to be traded. Ilya Kovalchuk included. So I'm not, I mean, I get it. The thing that bugs me about it is that, I talk about the Rangers a lot, and like certainly they've had luck fall their way in some cases, but the ability they had to pivot quickly. They sent that letter out to their fans. We all made fun of them about it, and they announced they were going to go into a rebuild, but it didn't last all that long. It really didn't. They went out and they signed, Artemi Panarin. They signed Jacob Trouba. They go out and make these big deals, and all of a sudden build this foundation that is workable. So I think these kind of contracts prevent you from making that pivot later, right? And we might not care about like the post Crosby Malkin era now, but sooner or later somebody is gonna, and deals like this one can make it difficult to successfully get out of those weeds, and you don't want to become an Ottawa.
No
one wants that.
No one.
So I guess my next question on this topic is, how does a trade like this affect a guy like P.O. Joseph, where we were expecting him to come up this year and play, and he's a left side defenseman. So, and I don't know if he can play the right side, but you kind of stacked on that left side a little bit. There's kind of a log jam. So what do you think that
And they
has
brought
for
back
his
Ricola.
future?
Yeah. So Juuso Riikola got re-signed, which, I scratched my head out a little bit because nothing they did really gave you the impression they wanted him on the team. You know what I mean? I think the idea behind P.O. Joseph is these not let him sit down in Wilkes-Barre for a little bit to start the season out. I mean, unless he were to come into camp, and let's put it like this. If you guys remember back to like Derek Pouliot, there was a period of time where Derek Pouliot was playing so well in Wilkes-Barre that all you heard about was get him up, call him up now. It was like this constant parade of people wanting to see Derek Pouliot. Nobody's done that with P.O. Joseph. And it's not, and that's the difference between being good in the American Hockey League and knocking people's socks off in the American Hockey League. So I don't think he's been bad. I think he's going to be an NHL player, but I wouldn't be shocked if it was look, this team's going to get hurt. It happens every year. It won't be long before the phone rings and he needs to come up anyway. I think that's kind of the mindset behind that one is there's no rush on this quite yet.
Right. I want to kind of switch gears and go back to the Hornquist trade, because the other piece coming back, Colton Sevier, and I didn't have this on here to talk about, but we've kind of alluded to it, obviously, with the addition of Matheson, with the addition of Colton Sevier, and you talked about, Kapanen fitting in on that first line. So I hate to put you on the spot, Jesse, but if you were constructing the lines and pairings right now, not necessarily what you would do, but how you think they're going to play out, opening night, what is the Pens lineup going to look like?
So Colton Sevier is not in it for me.
Okay.
I'm just going to start with that. Top six is pretty much set, right? So you're going to have the Gensel, Crosby, Kapanen is going to be your top side. So that'll make your second line Zucker, Malkin, and Rust. I love everything about that top six, by the way. I mean, the Kapanen thing aside, like that second line is delicious. And I'm going to go on record on your podcast. I've said it, not on your podcast. I've said it a bunch. I think Jason Zucker could score 40 goals next year. If it happened, I would not be surprised at all. And that's just based off the small sample that we got. The results were super good. I think that with the opportunity to come into a camp and go through the process, it's only going to be better. The question now, here's where it gets fun, because now in the bottom six, you could pretty much do whatever you want. Is Jared McCann going to play center, or is Jared McCann a left wing? Mark Jankowski kind of indicates to me that maybe Jared McCann's going to play center at the start of the year. So I wouldn't be shocked if you kept Zach Aston Reese is going to be out. So that compromises your ability to roll a Czar line, Czar with, Tanev and Bluger at the start of the year. Sam Lafferty is probably a guy there for me. So I'm putting Tanev with Bluger and Lafferty. And then I guess that makes my third line McCann, Rodriguez, and Jankowski.
With McCann as the center, though.
No, with Jankowski as the center.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
To me, I don't know that I have a passionate opinion about what position is better for Jared McCann.
That's what I was going to ask you, because that's a hot topic.
I don't know that I know the answer yet. Like Jeff from Pensblog wrote a really good article about it. Jay Fresh on Twitter has talked a lot about it. I'd still, to me, you could go either way with that.
Well, Jeff wrote an article about it. I don't know if it was a really good article, but.
And then I guess my right defenseman on the third. So you got Letang, Dumoulin, Pedersen, Marino, and then I don't know. Is it Chad Ruhwedel season?
That's another topic. Is who wins that third right defense, that sixth spot? Is it going to be Chad Ruhwedel? Is the guy not on the team yet?
I almost feel like Chad Ruhwedel is the most least damaging option. He's proved completely capable of giving you, if nothing else, slightly average results. So, they're keeping there's still cap room, which they'll probably care. So here's the question. I think if they do try to address it via trade, it's sort of a situation like the Greg McKegg is your third line center one from a couple years ago, where we're going to fix this, but it's not going to be right away. I think that what's left in cash capital might be left as a floater going into the regular season. In the event that some unprecedented emergency happens, you can combine that money with your long-term injured reserve savings and, make some kind of emergency move. So I have a feeling they're going to leave this as like a little bit of a chaser.
Okay.
So my friend wanted me to ask you about, since we're on the topic of the lines and everything. So obviously everybody has the top 6 set in stone. There's not even a question. But he's not a fan of the bottom 6. And so I guess based off of your bottom 6, what do you think of those lines? Because it seems like the top 6 job is to score goals. Bottom 6 job is to prevent goals. And there's not much disparity in between.
Is not at all. Yeah. And like, I think when they signed Mark Jankowski, that was the really thing that like, you kind of were like, all right, like they're loading up with like low key Selke candidates, like the non Selke candidates, Mark Jankowski doesn't provide much offensively at all. I've had discussions with people that have tried to convince me that there's upside. I don't know that I see it, one conversation I had was, his line mates had really low shooting percentages last year, and that was the reason he had more points. And I don't know, like we'll see. I just, what I can tell you for sure is, regardless of what you want to say about last year's offensive performance, he's good defensively. He's a good defensive hockey player. I haven't quite figured out why yet in the games I've watched. I don't know that I've pinpointed what makes that the case, other than really so far just being present and putting in the effort, which, to be honest though, a lot of NHL defense is that. Like, it's kind of the NBA in that sense, or like, especially if you find yourself on the wing, you really just need to kind of be in there. But Zach Aston Reese, the hype is real for him defensively, and Teddy Bluger. We put him in that trio together. Your point though it's your friend's point stands. Who's going to score goals, right? Like, if you run into a team like Boston, who can match your top 6, you're going to rely on them to carry you over the top. I don't know that they have that, so we've always had these discussions about the Penguins being very top heavy. I think that's definitely the case this year from the forward group perspective. I actually think this might be one of the first times in a long time that we could say defensively that won't be the case. If they deploy Mike Matheson, even if he plays with Chad Ruhwedel, if they deploy him the way they deploy Johnson and Schultz, people in Pittsburgh are going to love him, because he'll dominate that deployment flat out. He'll dominate it. So and John Marino, hold on to your butt, because Lord only knows like what in the hell everybody's about to get in the encore of that. So this could be the year where like maybe the first pairing isn't even the best one. I'm excited about that. But yeah, offensively, the goals are, you're going to hope that a couple people have a career year offensively.
I'm not trying like to be facetious here. I'm genuinely curious about this, what your answer would be here. So Jankowski, obviously the offense, non-existent last year, but he had a couple double-digit goals seasons the 2 prior years. What would you attribute that to?
So people look at him and they look at these defensive numbers and his size, and I think there's this assumption that he's this plotting, like, like it's not like that at all. Like, he's actually really good in transition, and the backbone is just that center drive, like getting to the front of the net and knowing where the puck is going to end up. I don't think that Mark Jankowski is particularly overwhelmingly skilled in any one area. He's more of a locational goal scorer, noting his size and how effectively he can use it. This isn't a situation, guys, where he's like plopped in the crease, just beating people over the front of the head. He's effectively screening, creating rebound opportunities, getting pucks off body, winning them along the side of the cage and in the board. So, that lends itself to points. Where that was last year, I don't know what Calgary was asking him to do. And, his individual personal shooting percentage wasn't terrible. So, again, was there something that they were being asked to do from a coaching perspective that just caused them to sacrifice more offense. I'm not sure yet, but it's not as if he's devoid of all, forms of offensive talent.
All right. Okay. I want to address something else, but somebody did just come into the YouTube chat and ask a question. They wanted to make sure we knew this was a real question because they're usually sarcastic with us in here. However, they said, does he think realistically that the window has closed on this core? Are they done winning Stanley Cups?
No.
Good answer. Brian Russ would agree with you.
Yeah, he said the same thing on the show.
Yeah.
I mean, he has to.
Yeah.
Yes, he doesn't have to.
Yeah,
true.
I mean, like I'm a big Tristan Jarry mark. I have been since they drafted him. I thought that he was going to be the starter of this team one day, and I think that he's a workload goaltender. So I'm pumped about a potential continuation of what you got out of him in the early portion of last year. It's not uncommon either in the American Hockey League or out in the Western Hockey League to have to play 3 games in 5 nights or, 4 nights in some cases. So he just seems to eat that up. And I feel very strongly about the performance he's going to give. I mentioned the defense being, I think, in a semi-decent place. I've seen too much of Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin to answer no to that question. Because I don't think either one of them are any worse for the wear right now.
I completely agree. The next 2 things that I want to talk about that tie in together because it's 2 guys coming back on new deals. One, we already talked about, Jared McCann, whether he plays left wing, center. He was an RFA. They gave him a new contract for a little bit less money than I thought it was going to be, and I'm not going to complain about that. Granted, he did end up being a healthy scratch at some point in the bubble. So what are your thoughts on that deal? And again, we kind of already talked about, I'm not sure where he's going to slide in at, but regardless of where he does, what are your thoughts on the deal?
I'm fine with it. I mean, I thought it's super friendly to the Penguins, and it could be super friendly to Jared McCann if he makes the most of this bridge. I mean, where would this take him, if he put up, 25, 30 goals? I mean, it's an opportunity, I think, to, it's one of those shorter, I guess, show me deals that you get. So I'm excited about it. I don't feel passionately about Jared McCann in any direction. I just don't. There. For me, even if no matter what happens, I mean, he's going to be one of the only players in that group that is going to help drive shots. And it's not that it's by a huge volume. I just think there are historical moments going back through his career where he's gone, shots have increased, and they're going to need it. That's probably the number one compliment you could give to Colton Sevier is he's almost like a Tyler Kennedy-ish presence, and just fires it from all over the place. That for me, that's going to be much needed for that group.
Okay. And obviously the other new deal, you just talked about Tristan Jarry a little bit, a new 3-year deal. I mean, I would ask how you feel about it, but I feel like you've kind of already explained where you're at with Tristan Jarry. But you look at just the goaltending situation as a whole, and right now, Casey DeSmith probably going to be the backup. How do you feel about the goaltending going into next season?
Yeah, I think the question everybody's got is it Casey DeSmith? Is that his job? Do they need to go out and get, somebody to be, I'm thinking Antti Niemi without the, disastrous results that are associated with them. I mean, that would be ideal probably. That's not, I think that's probably something they're still on the sly for. They did sign, Max Lagacé, so that helps with the American Hockey League depth as a compliment to Emil Larmy. But I think in terms of a quote unquote veteran presence back there, I think that's still something they've got an eye out for on the cheap, which means it is not Marc-Andre Fleury.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it's just Vegas, saying it, but it sounds like they've shut down the idea of trying to trade him, right? So they're going to roll with $12 million in goaltending.
Yeah. Nate Schmidt, I think that deal kind of sealed it. It's not quite necessary right now for them. So that's a lot. Yeah, that's a lot. It's a lot of money.
But you feel comfortable then with knowing that Tristan Jarry is going to be the number one, just
I mean, for him being the number one, yeah. I don't know that the tandem I feel great about.
okay.
But I don't have a concern about Tristan Jarry as a starter. No. Like, here's the story I'll tell you. Tristan Jarry, the year he got drafted, only played 27 games. That's not a lot in a draft year. The Jets' current backup, Laurent Brossoit, was the starter in Edmonton that he played behind at the time. And Brossoit took all the games. Edmonton won the Memorial Cup that year, but not really with much involvement from Tristan Jarry. He got some games internationally, got some like U18 tournament showcases for sure that helped. But what people bought on him was the school of goaltending that he came from. And I don't even know that I fully understand it, but he and a couple of other really good goaltending prospects from that era went to a camp and studied under a school that was all really geometric in nature and about like having your angles correct and in craning your neck in certain positions. And it was super technical. And it was, for me, like, it was almost like when people got him after that, it was like, we don't even know how to coach this kid. We don't even know what he's doing. Like, what is this? Like, how do you manage this? And it was just so unique that even though he'd only played that little bit, everybody was like, yeah, I'll buy that. So to me, that's such a rock solid foundation. You've never really seen him lose his game at any point from the time he was drafted to present day. He has not gone through a long stretch where he's been completely out to lunch. That consistency is what being a good goaltender is all about. So I just think he's just got the mechanical build for it. It's been weird from early portions, and even back in Edmonton, there was like a time frame where people are like, should he start? Like, he's 17, like 16, like maybe we should start him. Like, he made people second guess all the way back to that time. And I think when he was in the American Hockey League, guys, to be frank, it was out of sight, out of mind. Everybody was so focused on the Murray, Fleury, all that stuff that went on with that. Nobody was thinking about Tristan Jarry. But you talk to anybody that's a Wilkes-Barre Scranton season ticket holder, they have nothing but glowing reviews about Tristan Jarry's time there. So for me, he's ready. He proved it last year. There were stretch runs, albeit short, and I understand that, but there were stretch runs where I think you got an example of where he could potentially fit in the hierarchy of this league, and that for me is at the lower bottom third.
Yeah, I mean, I fell in love with the puck handling. I feel like that's just such an underrated part of really goaltenders in general in his game. I feel like he's, one of the best at it already. So that to me, when you can handle the puck back there and just, that helps with breaking the puck out of your own zone. That's just part of his game that I feel like not enough people are talking about.
Yeah, and really, probably have to go all the way back to Tom Barrasso to get to a goaltender that could do that without giving you like a heart attack. Like a Fleury, like, loved to do it, but I don't know that it was ever a strength of his. So yeah, for me, I that's a huge bonus, and anything you could do to just take the pressure off of the D and help kickstart things offensively is going to be a huge help. That's going to be an added bonus this year.
Yeah, I think that's the best way I can put it is Tristan Jarry doesn't scare me with the way he plays. Because there were aspects about Murray and going back to Fleury, especially Fleury when he handled the puck behind the net sometimes, that they like gave you a heart attack as a fan. But Jarry, it's just like very calm, cool, collected. You don't really get to see that with him.
I think it's like very much a school of goaltending that tries to force the shooter and to be the one that has to do something. It's very proactive, I think, goaltending from an angular perspective and how he's on top of his crease and the way he cuts things down. It makes life tough on a shooter. So, I mean, that's one of the better compliments that you could give to a goaltender. Again, you've never really seen him have a meltdown. There's never been a time where he's looked out of it, and you've been concerned about his game. You really, for me, the Penguins just need a guy who's average. If you can give the Penguins average goaltending, they could take that and win a Stanley Cup.
Right. I was about to bring up too, like when you're at a Penguin game and you hear fans yelling like shoot the puck on the power play, when you would have like Fleury or Murray go out and get the puck, that used to be like the same thing except it would stay in the net.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But
Or
hopefully it'll get
like
that
you
Christian
just
Jarry, 'cause
got that, it was that quell of excitement, something interesting is about to happen.
I guess since we're talking about Jari still, so for years I had always heard something, and I had brought it up in the show, and since you know better than anyone, at least in my opinion, about Penguins prospects, hockey prospects, and in that sort of field. So I has always heard that comparing the two, Jari was supposed to be better than Murray until Murray came onto the scene in 16 and did what he did. So what do you think of that? That Jari was supposed to be the better goalie from the start?
I would have agreed with that for sure. Yeah,
Okay.
I would agree with that for sure. I think what happened with Matt Murray is not something I don't think anyone saw coming. That run, not only just the opponents that he faced in there, but how young he was and still so kind of like raw in his professional development. It was out of left field. This wasn't, nobody at the time was banking on Matt Murray usurping Marc-Andre Fleury. That was not a common thought. So I when the Penguins drafted Tristan Jarry, I jokingly tweeted, "That's your future starting goaltender." But like, I was kind of only half kidding because really, like, you could see it even then. He won. And he went on the next year and won the Memorial Cup. Just dominated the CHL, and you were like, "Yeah, all right." Everybody was right about this. Like this is, that run was really good, and it wasn't just that they won the Memorial Cup. That was a good team. Don't get me wrong. Like Curtis Lazar was on that team. Like, they had good players, but he was ridiculous. And there were circumstances in that run where he was standing on his head, and it wasn't just one of those things that it was like he was sitting back there between the pipes, like, just surfing water and like chilling. Like he had his work cut out for him. So I think it was at that moment that everybody was like, wow, goalie's tough to evaluate. They take a long time to develop, and a lot of things can go wrong, but like it was pretty encouraging to watch that.
Right. Okay, let's talk about another goaltender, Matt Murray, who was traded to Ottawa. Signs a new deal upon going there, 4 years, 24 million, or is it 25 million?
25 million.
Yeah, so 6.25 per. What were your thoughts on the trade, not just, from the Penguins perspective, but how would you be feeling also if you're a fan of the Ottawa Senators about this deal?
Good, I think, because that's one thing you don't have to worry about, right? Like, I mean, the question I think I'd ask if I was an Ottawa fan is like, is Matt Murray going to win games for us in the state of this team? I don't know that the answer to that question is yes. Like, is he going to go out there and steal a bunch of games for Ottawa? I think I'm glad he got a good deal, and good for him. He deserves that. And I mean, if I was a Senators fan, I'd be pleased. I'd be one less area I'd have to worry about. And I think that a good guy to have navigate you through a rebuilding era.
Okay.
And the price, if you're an Ottawa fan, John Gruden Jr. is not moving the needle for you. It moves the needle for the Penguins because the cupboard's so bare. But given that Ottawa, just had quintillion picks again in this draft, and that, giving up, a prospect who's just about to graduate to the American Hockey League is something that I think they're probably willing to live with over there.
Was the return for Murray about what you thought it would be, though?
Probably a little better. I didn't think I knew that going in that the rumor was that Penguins were trying to get a first round pick, and I was like, there's no way that's going to happen because there's only one time, like in the last decade, a first round pick's been traded for a goalie, and I didn't think Matt Murray was going to be added to that list. I didn't think they could even get a second. I was shocked that they got number 52 back, and it made sense that they danced with Ottawa because Ottawa had that pick to do it. They had the cap space too, and I think that's ultimately what ruled out a lot of the more fancier destinations like Colorado. And when you look at the business Colorado is doing or trying to do now, you can understand why they weren't in on Matt Murray. So yeah, I mean, it was a place that made sense. It gave Ottawa the opportunity to get a sure thing without wading into the chaos of unrestricted free agency and everything that comes with that. But I didn't expect. I don't know what I thought the Penguins were going to get from a prospect perspective. I think I would have expected something maybe more in line with that Kapanen deal. But I'm having spent all weekend watching John Gruden Jr. tape. I'm encouraged. It's a good prospect, a decent prospect to have in the system. And again, guys, let me say, only because things are so bare. Right? Like if we were Ottawa, I wouldn't probably be batting an eye at this, but I think there's a player that's going to have an impact at the American League level for sure this season, and then who knows what after that.
Yeah, I don't know much about him. He scored what though, like 30 goals or something in the OHL.
He played last year with Antonio Stranges, who was a draft pick of this year, and Luke Evangelista. Both those players went in like the top 150. He spent time between them. He's big. He's really big. I mean, he's every bit of 6'1", but it's not one of those situations where he can also skate. So he's on a really, really talent-rich hockey team that's chock full of skill top to bottom and did not stick out like a sore thumb. Fit right in. But also did some of the things you expect a guy who's 6'1" and can lay the wood to do. Separating man from puck, getting in there, breaking plays up, being a nightmare to deal with. All that stuff was there. So now the question, it's interesting because when Ottawa drafted him, they did so from the United States program. Drew Gruden was a part of the U.S. development program, World Junior team all the way down. Then he went to Miami and played for the Red Hawks, had a really good freshman year there, and then left there and went to London, Ontario to play in the CHL. That is really weird. Like, that's unconventional. I think Ottawa, from what I had read, just talked him into going to London. They felt better, about his development up there. Mm-hmm. But it's not a bad thing because he's gotten a little bit of everything so far. The collegiate game is much more pro style, I think, than the CHL is. So he's already spent time there, got that CHL prospect experience, got the international experience. I think that super equips him to have a monster first year in the American Hockey League.
Okay.
So when it comes to Matt Murray's legacy as a Penguin, if you ask me personally, I think he will go down as one of the, if not the most underappreciated Penguins ever, at least by the fan base. So where do you think he stacks up in that sort of realm?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. Do you guys like soccer?
I do.
So it's like Sir Alex Ferguson leaves Man United, right?
Mm-hmm.
And David Moyes comes in, and it was you could make the argument that nothing David Moyes did would have made him successful, right? Because you're living in that shadow, like that never goes away. And Marc-Andre Fleury represented a lot of really important things to people in this city. The highlight was floating around this week of his debut game. John Barbaro announcing him, as the starter night one against the Kings. Like, that was such a turning point. Things were really bad for a good bit of time. And we all looked at that moment as the moment where the tide turned, and it was like the low water mark was gone at that point. So I don't ever fault people for that. He was probably the most likable guy that anyone will ever meet in their life, ever. And won a championship here, and three championships. And, but to me, I don't know that, using that same analogy I gave you before, that we ever really viewed him, or not we, but some people ever really gave him the fair chance, and that total opposite personality, right? Complete dichotomy as far as how they operated. And maybe that just didn't win people over. I don't know. I think sometimes it was over exaggerated. There was that meme floating around last year of the restaurant and, people spitting on him at Atria's or something on his birthday. I don't know what, but all that stuff. But to me, there were periods of time where there were grace periods that were extended to other people that I don't really feel like were ever extended to him, outside of the coaching staff, who obviously felt strongly about him. But unassuming, and you know what, to your point too, I would be willing to say, Tyler, that part of this, that personality plays a role in it. And at the end of the day, that brick wall sort of nature of him, I don't ever think it was something that really ever did him any favors. But at the end of the day, I mean, look, 2 cups are 2 cups. So I think the history will often reflect who's writing it.
Did you think anything of it whenever he didn't thank the fans in his Instagram post?
No.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't either. I was like, in my opinion, he probably shouldn't have. So good for him, just because of a lot of the ways he was treated.
I didn't even notice.
Yeah.
Until you pointed it out, I didn't even know.
Yeah, he didn't. So that was like a big thing I saw on Twitter. People were talking about is that he didn't.
I think that
kind of
speaks to our point, though, right? Like, who parses it over to the point that you're like making notes on his farewell speech so you can find something to complain about one last time,
Yeah, because someone was pointing out how like a lot of fans when they leave it, or players when they leave a team will be like, and most importantly, thank you to the fans or something like that. But he said most importantly, thank you to my teammates, and he didn't mention the fans once. And I was like, who cares? Like,
yeah,
I mean, for a lot how he used to treat a lot of the time, like, he has nothing to like owe the fans anyway.
Well, that'll be an interesting montage. Should there be people in the building when he comes back?
Right.
Another good guy, or so we hear, had a lot less success here, though. Also not on the team anymore. Jack Johnson has been bought out by the Penguins, and he actually found a new home since me putting that in the notes to talk about with the New York Rangers. However, we are all, I believe, very happy about Jack Johnson no longer being here. Jesse, I don't know what you would possibly have to say about this, but let's hear about your thoughts about Jack Johnson being bought out and also getting another job.
Well, I didn't think that the buyout was going to happen. I was shocked.
Yeah.
Everybody was, especially after all the PR that had happened, you know what I mean, leading up to that event. I mean, look, I don't know what happened over the course of like the discussion about this, but somehow or another, it got twisted into like every problem stems here. When I think the better argument is a lot of problems stemmed from there. Not every, and you'd be crazy to point to one skater and be like, this is the source of our woes. Like that's not how the game works. It's disingenuous to make that argument, but we can 100% make the argument that the team is objectively better, right? Like we could use a metric like wins above replacement and say like there's a potential of 10 standing points difference and not having him in the lineup and having Mike Matheson in the lineup. Okay. Now is that a good enough evaluation now? Like, no one's saying that this suddenly makes them the odds on favorite to win the Stanley Cup. 10 points is 10 points, guys, at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And let it, the standings speak for themselves. And, again, like no matter how you slice it, it's an improvement. You want to say it's marginal. That's fine. The team is better. Point blank, period. I'll blow your mind with this. Corey Schneider, who hand tracks games for the Athletic and All Three Zones project, had watched Jack Johnson through 137 attempted zone entries at him. Okay. So you're thinking of him as the defenseman facing a zone entry 137 times. Do you know how many he stopped? Guess.
I'm going to guess 10.
Go down.
I was going to say less than 10. Is it 8? Oh my gosh.
8. I mean,
so that's real. You know what I mean? Like there's no dancing around that. And now, like, I just think people, to me, guys, this was a conversation about archetypes. And what I mean by that is it was less about Jack Johnson, the player himself, and more about what his presence in the lineup was supposed to be. People feel very strongly that you still need a certain kind of defenseman to do a certain kind of thing. That net clearing, you know what I'm talking about, right? The crease clearing, bone crunching hitter, physical presence. All that is just pseudo speak for bad skater can't handle the puck. which is a job that no longer exists in the league. Right? We're past that point. The game's changed. It's a different game now. It changed in I think it changed fully in 2016 when the Penguins did what they did. And they made the decision to sell out to play a certain kind of hockey. And then everybody else is like, you know what? Great idea. We're going to do the same thing. And look at how Tampa just won. Look at their style of play they just won with. It was wide open. Wide open. So, I mean, that's where we live. If you can't skate, you can't play. And no one should be shocked by the results because they existed well before Penn went to paper on the Penguins contract. It was buyer beware back then. It was buyer beware for the New York Rangers. And the New York Rangers right now are saying the exact same things the Penguins front office said when they signed that deal 2 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, granted, it's for 1 year instead of 5 years, but that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to back up and go back to the day that the Penguins signed Jack Johnson because I didn't follow you at that point, and I can probably take a good guess as to what your reaction was. However, when the Penguins signed Jack Johnson, like, what was going through your mind? Was there any type of optimism?
No. There was just no reason. Yeah, I mean,
that's just a simple answer.
And then, like, so here's what I did. There was all that smoke about, like, I know what you did last summer situation with Rutherford, talking about the scratch and that whole war of words that got exchanged, right? I went back and watched those games for the Athletic. That was my pet project for the summer at the Athletic. I was like, all right, let's go watch those exact games that they're talking about that led up to the benching and see if we could pick anything out, right? And what I picked out was the Jackets had just a couple guys who were better than him. So there was no secret conspiracy. I mean, he looked just the same then as he did for the Penguins. It's just Marcus Nudavara turned out to be pretty good. Oh, all right. Now you're not playing anymore. So I wasn't shocked because, like, I just feel like, you know, for what they were trying to do, you know, you kind of like lump the Ryan Reeves deal into that, right? That it was like nonsensical in the current makeup of the team and didn't scream future success.
Right. Okay. Well, speaking of future success, Tyler, you about to say something?
Yeah. So I reread that your article about Jack Johnson earlier. I think you wrote it like a month ago or so, or maybe it was a few weeks ago. But in that article, you talked about how Rutherford had defended him more times than the Penguins had won in their series against Montreal. And so I'm curious what you think. Do you think Rutherford was saying those things to try to, I guess, keep teams interested in a trade? And if he actually, and he didn't mean them, or do you think he genuinely meant what he was saying?
I don't know. I think history would probably say that he meant them.
That's scary to me.
Well, the reason I say that is I think if you go all the way back, even to Carolina, right, and you think back on the time that he spent there, right, like they, you know, he brought in Manny Malhotra his last year in Carolina, right? Great story, but wasn't a particularly useful player for them, right? I just there was like loyal. There's always situations where, you know, he found a piece that he really liked, and then like that he fixated on it. You know, Alex Semin 1 year $7 million. Yeah, that's an exist. You know, that's a reminder of that. So for me, I just think that like that Jack Johnson coming back in the first place was really just, there was an element of nostalgia probably there a little bit, right? Like they drafted him, you know, had a connection to the player, you know, Kasperi Kapanen. You know, how long did Sammy play in Carolina? I mean, a long time. He won a cup there, right? So, you know, Corey Stillman is the one I was trying to think of. Corey Stillman back in Carolina was another acquisition that was kind of like nostalgia-driven loyalty to players who had done well, that had worked out for him in the past. And it worked out in that case, though. Like, I mean, like Stillman and Stahl and Eric Cole was like a great line, right? So in that case, it worked out. But you could go all the way back to Corey Stillman, and that was in 2010 for an example of, you know, him sticking to what he knows.
Yeah. I mean, but you see that a lot, like you mentioned, just like the nostalgia factor of it and thinking, hey, it worked once, it's going to work again. And that's not always the case. So, but anyway, the last thing I want to talk about, we mentioned, talking about the future. So you were very into the NHL draft, NHL prospects. The NHL draft has come and gone, and the Penguins, as we mentioned, with the Matt Murray trade acquiring pick 52, they used that on a goalie. Then they used pick 77 on a goalie. So for people that are like questioning that, what would you say, and what do you think about those two players in particular?
Well, I get the confusion, I guess, especially considering like, the bevy of people that were available that could, you'd think make a good impact for you offensively or defensively in those ranges. But I like kind of like spent all weekend it's really hard to find Swedish and Finnish under 20 junior tape. It's really hard. It's not easy, it's not easy. So that's what I did this weekend. I really like both these goalies for different reasons. I think it's reasonable to assume they view goaltender as a tradable asset and that they don't intend on keeping both of them. And maybe like a wait and see what happens with one. We can, trade them later on while we're still in that win now mode. But here's the way I would sum this up for you. Callie Klang. Both players, by the way, played at the exact same level, just in different countries. Okay. And they're both playing at the exact same level right now, just one's in Sweden and one's in Finland. So their trajectory is exactly the same. Joel Blomqvist had the advantage of being the number one goaltender for Finland. So he had no competition. And on the international stage, he was a horse. But in Sweden, there's this a kid with the last name Wallstedt, who's going to go this year, 2021, next year, excuse me, who blocked Callie Klang from starting. So Callie Klang only ended up with like 4 international games under his belt. And that's like the main difference between the two, which probably explains the difference in draft spots. You could almost, in my opinion, put the two right next to each other from a talent perspective. Not to like drive an old adage and beat a dead horse, but like Callie Klang played on a really bad team. They finished 14th of 20 in the standings, but he had the 5th best save percentage. So says everything you need to know right there. It's almost like he thrives in chaos. He's super unconventional, gets really good low to the ice, sort of flop around like a fish and makes the 10 bell. He's a 10 bell save goalie. I don't know that I've really seen an area of his that is a weakness outside of when you get him in those chaotic moments. Sometimes he sort of maintains that chaotic energy into moments to where it's not necessary. So it's like he's a little overzealous at times. Joel Blomqvist played on a really good team, put up really good results, and in his regular season didn't really get a whole lot of it wasn't under siege a whole lot. I think he reminds me more of a Matt Murray. It just the way he plays the game is, in my opinion, very similar. And people hate hearing this, where it's like Klang is almost the Fleury in how he plays, and Blomqvist is almost the Murray in how he plays. And like that's their style. I think personality wise, it's not quite the same, but style wise, that's kind of how it works. Like Callie Klang, for example, in shootouts, he hides in the net before the shooter takes the puck, and he'll sit inside the net sideways. So he'll like tuck himself real small, get in the net sideways, and then when the shooter touches the puck, then he comes out and gets to the top of the crease. It's the weirdest thing I've ever seen. And you look at me like, that is so weird. Like that's like almost like a, yeah. So I don't know, like he's almost like that erratic sort of like, electric presence. But Blomqvist for me was, I thought he struggled. His arms and legs are really long, and I think sometimes he can't get them tight enough to his body quick enough. That was the one thing I noticed. He kept getting all the games I watched. He got beat 6-hole a lot. Not a lot, but that's where he got beat. I didn't see him get beat in a lot of other places. Laterally, side to side, super fast, low to the ice, and is really good in traffic. Really good getting up over top of the defense and being able to look around people. And he's only 6 foot. He's not I mean, Callie Klang's bigger than him. But I mean, in traffic, the way he moves and he can get around angles to see with his lateral movement is really good. So I'm excited about the trajectory of both. Both of them this year are starting for bad teams. So you're kind of going to get a real sense. And I had the chance this weekend to watch the Nhl Gretzky Memorial Cup bronze medal game where they went against each other for Sweden and Finland. And Klang absolutely stood on his head in a 5-1 drubbing. But it's going to be fun to watch them, kind of both of them this year in the second highest level in their country, playing against older players on teams that aren't great. I think you're going to learn a lot about both of them this year.
Awesome. So, well, I have actually two questions. One's going to be putting you on the spot. One, can either one handle the puck? If so, if they both can, which one is better? And two is, you mentioned how high you were on Jari pretty much originally. If you're making the prediction right now, which one of these two has the better chance of being the future goalie for the Penguins?
I'd probably go with Callie Klang. Only because I just feel really strongly that if Wallstedt wasn't the goalie in Sweden and Klang was more on the international stage, it's more my style. That's what it is. It's a stylistic preference. And I'm not a goaltending expert. I just love the way the kid plays. I think he gets wild back there when the going gets tough. I put a video today on The Athletic of a windmill save, like a glove save he made last year for his junior team. Cross crease, bang, bang. And it's just, you watch it and you're like, I don't even know how you pulled that off. It's a lot of wild stuff. So I'd probably go with Klang just out of a personal, but again, that's like, I just like that style of goaltending. What was the other questions? I forgot.
I asked if one of them or both of them are able to handle the puck, because that was something that.
Yeah. I would tell you that they're unremarkable. Both of them are unremarkable, but not unremarkable. Like I didn't see anything that blew my mind. It was a lot of just stepping back behind the net and making 5-footers, I didn't see them make any mistakes either though. So, we'll take that as a win as well.
Right. Okay. Tyler, do you have anything else?
I did, but now I can't think of it.
Jesse, do you have anything else?
I don't. I rest
no questions for us.
Am I irrational? How about this? Am I irrational in my confidence about this Browns game?
As in the Steelers are going to win?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Like I'm like real swagged up about this.
I'm actually super excited to talk about this game tomorrow on our Steelers Talk show. I see. So it's strength against strength. I mean, this game is going to be one of the trenches. They run the ball as well as anybody, even with Nick Chubb out. And we stop the run as well as anybody in the league, allowing just 64 yards per game. So,
like Mike Tomlin said, 2 trains on a track. See you Sunday.
Yeah. That's a completely different topic, but I can't. There's nobody that is better at coach speak in the world than Mike Tomlin. I mean, that guy can answer questions without answering anything. And just the words that he uses, it's unbelievable. Yeah. I need to take a class.
That would be my parting knowledge to you guys. Don't live in your fears.
Right. The standard is always the standard on Around the 412.
I remembered. I have 2 things.
Okay, go ahead.
I remember now. So first one, who is the best hockey player on the world right now? And the second one, will we see Samuel Poulin next year at some point?
Oh, how did he not come up already?
The answer to the second part is yes.
Okay.
They got shut down though, his team, because of coronavirus. So there was a little bit of a gap there, but how do we define best in the world? What do we?
Who your personal a lot of people say. I mean, a lot of homers, Penguin fans will say Sid Still. A lot of people say McDavid. Some say McKinnon. It's just your personal. Who is the best player?
Connor McDavid.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's my answer. Yeah. Top to bottom.
I mean, if you're starting a franchise, that to me is the answer, and that's what it comes down to.
Right.
I mean, I still think Sidney Crosby's the smartest. I don't think there's anybody that can think the game better than him. But McDavid's ability now is it's kind of too good to ignore.
How many years do you think Sid realistically has left? As
You had two questions.
Super. Yeah, well, this was we're talking about Sid now. So, how many years realistically does Sid have left at superstar potential?
I don't know because he's not. He supersedes expectation every time. So
if you put a number on it, you're gonna look like an idiot.
An idiot. Yep.
Yeah. He just changes the way he plays too.
But even Lemieux,
he's smarter than anybody.
In the late 2000s, going at the late 2000s, but into his twilight, before the blood clot issues and stuff, he was still really good because he just was smarter than everybody else. So I don't, for me, it's just the same thing. There's no difference.
100%. Awesome. All right. Well, other than that, Jesse, we can't thank you enough for joining. It was a lot of fun. Hope to do this again in the very near future. Get you back on here and talk about some more Penguin stuff. We'll see how a lot of these topics progress. Maybe we'll look like geniuses. Maybe we'll look like idiots when Colton Sevier scores 20 goals and is in the lineup, or who knows. But we can't thank you enough for coming on. You can follow Jesse at JMarshFOF on Twitter, so be sure to do that. Thanks again for coming on, and we will talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks, boys. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Thanks.
Bye-bye. All right, that was Jesse Marshall of The Athletic. Again, you can follow him at JMarshFOF on Twitter.
For my money, the best statistical mind, at least with covering Penguins hockey. So
that's what I was just saying is I'm not somebody that's not going to form my own opinions, right? I watch the game. I feel like I know the game well enough where I can form my own opinions. But if I'm looking for like a deeper dive into the analytical side of hockey, he's kind of my go-to guy, especially, social media. People talk about it a lot, crap on it a lot. I wouldn't be able to find Jesse's work really without it. That's how I know who he is. Go to The Athletic, read some of his stuff. If you have an Athletic subscription, or if you don't have one already, great reason to subscribe would be just to see Jesse's stuff himself, because he's a very talented writer and only getting better. So
yeah, I've been called a Corsi nerd before. He's definitely a Corsi nerd. So it is what it is. But yeah, his stuff is awesome.
We appreciate Anthony. Anthony's in here. He just said, great show. Thanks for the kind words. As always, thanks everybody for watching or listening. If you're listening, we suggest that you go to the YouTube, go to youtube.com/c/around the 412. You hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you can come in here and join the show live. I mentioned that I have a couple new ad reads to start reading from Manscaped. They gave me some options as to what to read. Yesterday, I broke out the football edition of the ad read. This week we are going, this show, because that was just yesterday. This show, I'm going to break out the fall edition of the ad read. So everybody get ready. This is my first time reading this. You can tweet me and tell me how bad I did after it. So autumn is in the air, and Manscaped is here to ensure you don't carve your pumpkins when grooming. By pumpkins, we actually mean your boys downstairs. In fact, Manscaped is on a mission to change the way that you approach caring for your balls. And great news, they just released their products in the UK, Canada, and Australia. I know that we have listeners there. I've actually looked at like the geography of where our listeners are, and there are some in different countries. We get like 12% of our listens in Canada. We have some in the UK as well. We know, like Gareth out in the UK, mm-hmm. He's always listening to the show. So shout out to him. I have pretty much everything that you can buy from Manscaped. I know Tyler has a lot of the stuff. A lot of our friends have it. We all love it. The scented products. It's a very distinct scent. It's awesome. I don't think you'll ever go back to the Old Spice. That is the deodorant and the toner right there.
Yeah, awesome my body lotion and cologne are in the bathroom. So,
right.
But these are readily available on my nightstand every day.
Right. Yeah, and they get used. So they're very useful. The Lawnmower 3.0, which is their new trimmer. They spent 18 months working on this thing. It's the newest in its line. They have also a new weed whacker, which they call it, which is an ear and nose trimmer. It uses the same skin safe technology as the Lawnmower 3.0 and all those other products. They have the new crop care kit, which is the crop preserver, which is the ball deodorant. You just showed them. Everyone knows pumpkin spice lattes and ball deodorant go hand in hand. I didn't know that before reading this, but apparently that's the case, and I can't say I disagree. The body wash, which we already talked about, also can be used in your hair. It's a kind of like a 3-in-1 body wash. shampoo and conditioner. So that's awesome. The ball wipes, which I actually just recently got. You never know when the opportunity is going to strike, so you should always be prepared. Plus, you don't want to stink when you sit around at Thanksgiving dinner. So 100% agree. That's absolutely the case, especially if you're bringing somebody home to your family to introduce at Thanksgiving. Maybe you step away from the table for a little bit and go sneak off. You're going to want to use one of the crop mops before doing so. If you suffer from stank foot and stand on your feet all day, then I have a product for you for that as well. It's called the Foot Duster, which is the foot deodorant. The cooling tea tree oil offers a pleasant experience for the stankiest feet and allows you to take your shoes off in confidence. Just recently got that. I can attest to that being a fantastic product as well.
That's my next order. I was going to be ordering that soon because my feet are dank after I come home from work.
Yeah, in the cologne too. I mean, you can spend hundreds of dollars on cologne really if you're going to look for like a brand like Gucci or or something like that. Their cologne I believe is like $13 and it smells fantastic as well. So between that and I only use that or Juju 2500, Juju's cologne. I use that on game days just as like a superstition. But other than that, I'm using the Manscaped cologne right now. And then of course all their products are vegan, they're cruelty free, they're dye free, they're sulfate free. Your manhood is in good hands when I'm talking about this stuff. So can you get any of this stuff? Go to manscaped.com. You get 20% off plus free shipping when you use the code 412 at checkout. Again, manscaped.com, 20% off plus free shipping with the code 412.
You won't regret it. I promise.
Hey, listen, I'll say this. If you truthfully do not care for the stuff when you get it, let me know and I'll Venmo you $5. That's how confident I am that you're going to love the stuff. Now you have to be honest about it. You can't love the stuff and then tell me to Venmo you $5 just because.
Sure, for sure.
But if you truthfully do not care for the products, I'll Venmo you $5.
Yeah, the proof's in the pudding. I'm not going to show you my pudding, but it is in the pudding.
So that covers some of your hair. For your other hair needs, you're going to head to Keats Barbershop, which is an old-fashioned barbershop located at 180 Brighton Avenue in Rochester, PA. Every Tuesday he's open 11 to 7. Every Friday Friday through. How did I mess this up? Open 11 to 7 Tuesday through Friday, 9 to 4 on Saturday.
Yeah,
that's his
right.
hours.
Close Monday and Sunday. There you go. I don't know why that's something I do whenever I stumble in the beginning of our
You know what it is? Because there's a random space in here for some reason. I don't know when I put that, but there's a random space there. So that's what threw me off. But anyways, Tuesday is the best day to go. He does $5 off for military personnel, first responders, and nurses. Again, that's Keats Barbershop, 180 Brighton Avenue in Rochester, PA. Just to clear things up, I will say again, that's 11 to 7 Tuesday through Friday, 9 to 4 on Saturday. So there's no confusion there. My flub, not Christian's. Other than that, again, if you're watching, thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment, do it all. That's the best way to support us right now. We're really trying to grow on YouTube. So if you're listening back, head over there, do the same thing. Subscribe, notification bell, like, comment, all that good stuff. Other than that, thanks for listening / watching this episode of Around the 412. This has been a presentation of Crowworthy. Winners are serving winners coast to coast with sports, gambling, and more. Follow us on Twitter at Around the 412. Follow them at Crowworthy. Visit the Pittsburgh City page at crowworthy.com for podcasts such as this one, blogs, gambling advice, all that good stuff and more. Until next time, we'll talk to you. Bye-bye.